The US military conducted airstrikes against Islamic State operatives in Somalia.
If you believe America's wars ended with the inauguration of Trump, think again. Amid all the headlines over his tweets, the wall, and scandals, something far more explosive happened behind the scenes. It was under Trump when Somalia became one of the worst targets of history's deadliest US drone campaigns. More bombs fell, more militants were hunted, and more lives were changed in ways that lasted forever. Brilliant military strategy, or just an excuse for creating more chaos, more violence, and more enemies? Did aggressive tactics by Trump finally crush terrorism in Somalia, or leave behind the biggest mess yet? By the end of this video, you'll see the shocking truth about what really happened, and why nobody is talking about it. So let's break it down. What exactly did Trump do in Somalia? Did his strategy work? And what does it mean for the future of US foreign policy? Stick around, because this story is far bigger than you think. If you think Somalia is just some faraway country with no impact on America, think again. Because for decades, Somalia has been one of the most dangerous breeding grounds for terrorism. It all started in the early 1990s when Somalia's government collapsed completely. What followed was a nightmare: famine, piracy, and violent militias taking control. And then came Al-Shabaab, a ruthless terrorist group with deep ties to Al-Qaeda. This was the group that carried out bombings, assassinations, and gruesome attacks, not only in Somalia, but also throughout the entire region.
Al-Shabaab is an affiliate of Al-Qaeda that has been operating in Somalia for a number of years. It's been fighting for control of Mogadishu and parts of Somalia, but it has acted outside of Somalia, not just in Kenya, but also in Uganda.
They became so potent that they threatened to turn Somalia into another Afghanistan, a country providing safe haven to terrorists planning attacks against the West. The US knew this could not be ignored. So for decades, American presidents tried to keep Al-Shabaab in check. Bush sent special forces. Obama ordered airstrikes. But when Trump came into office, he took things to a whole new level. If you think Trump was only focused on America first, you'd be surprised. While he pulled troops out of Afghanistan and Syria, he unleashed hellfire on Somalia. Just months into office in 2017, Trump took the game-changing decision that loosened the rules of engagement of airstrikes in the U.S.
To be sent initially to different parts, get prepared, then ultimately we're bringing them home. Yeah, we're bringing our troops back home. I got elected on bringing our soldiers back home.
What does that mean? That means more bombs, more drone strikes, and more aggressive military action than ever before. During Obama's government, airstrikes created thousands of casualties, and he also gave military free access to target Somalia. Trump did the same. He gave the military free rein to target Al-Shabaab anywhere and at any time, it feels like. And the results were staggering. In just 1 year, Trump launched more airstrikes in Somalia than Obama did in his entire presidency. By the end of Trump's term, he had quadrupled the number of airstrikes in Somalia. Al-Shabaab was down for some time, and it looked like a victory, but was it really a victory? Because while the US was dropping bombs, something much more dangerous was happening on the ground. If you think only terrorists were killed in these strikes, think again. Because with every airstrike, there were civilians caught in the crossfire. Entire families were wiped out. Villages were reduced to rubble. Innocent people died, and no one was held accountable. The US military insisted that civilian casualties were minimal, but human rights organizations told a different story.
Human rights group Amnesty International says 14 civilians were killed during 5 US airstrikes in Somalia in the last 2 years, an allegation the US military strongly denied.
Reports emerged of Somali farmers, women and children dying in US airstrikes, and that fueled anger, resentment, and anti-American sentiment. And here's where things get even worse. Every civilian death became a recruitment tool for Al-Shabaab. For every innocent Somali killed, more young men joined the terrorists, vowing revenge against the US. So let's get to the question. Did Trump's strategy finally destroy Al-Shabaab, or did it give them more room to breathe? If you think bombing terrorists is an assured means of defeating them, then you are in for a shock. Because despite all those hundreds of airstrikes, Al-Shabaab didn't disappear. Yes, they lost some leaders. Yes, they took heavy damage. But guess what? They adapted. Instead of operating in big groups, they scattered into smaller cells. They moved their operations deeper into the countryside, where drones couldn't reach them. And while the US was focused on killing terrorists, they weren't focused on fixing Somalia's deeper problems: corruption, poverty, and the lack of a functioning government. So what happened? Al-Shabaab kept recruiting, they kept attacking, and they proved that no amount of bombs could truly defeat them. At the end of the Trump presidency, Al-Shabaab was still one of the deadliest terrorist groups in the world. Recently, Trump was re-elected as President of the United States, and just a few days ago, he has struck the ISIS bases in Somalia again. The world woke up on February 1st, 2025, to hear news of a series of powerful airstrikes unleashed upon Somalia by the US. In a tweet, Trump said, "The message to ISIS and all others who would attack Americans is that we will find you and we will kill you." Sources in the military said the objective was inescapable: take out key terrorist operatives and cut short their expanding influence across the Horn of Africa. Trump himself wasted no time in boasting about the strikes. In a fiery post on Truth Social, he declared, "The strikes destroyed the caves they live in and killed many terrorists without, in any way harming civilians. Biden and his cronies wouldn't act quickly enough to get the job done. I did." But the real question is, did the strikes work, or did they just create a never-ending cycle of violence? On paper, the airstrikes were a success. The US claims that its forces took out multiple high-level ISIS targets. They say this will cripple the group's ability to operate. The harsh reality, however, is that terrorist organizations do not die by airstrikes. If history has taught us anything, it is that militants adapt, scatter, regroup, and often come back even stronger. In fact, some analysts believe these airstrikes can be a present to Al-Shabaab and ISIS. Why? Each civilian casualty, every mistake, becomes a new recruitment tool. The militants can now say, "See, the US bombs innocent Muslims. Join us and fight back." And like that, America's war on terror creates more terrorists. Escalation of military operations in Somalia will also lead to fears of entering a new cycle of war for Trump. The United States had been trying for years to mitigate itself from endless conflicts in the Middle East and Africa. Biden restricted the airstrikes, emphasizing a more diplomatic, intelligence-led approach. However, with the return of Trump, the worry is that America could get trapped in another war, this time without a defined endgame. Military analysts are already wondering, what is next? Is Trump going to bomb Somalia every time ISIS rises again? Does this become another Afghanistan? And here's the real kicker. What if these airstrikes fail? If ISIS keeps operating despite these attacks, does Trump send in ground troops? We have seen this before. It starts with airstrikes. Then comes special forces, then full-scale deployments. And before you know it, America is stuck in another unwinnable war. Beyond Somalia itself, these airstrikes have major global implications. Other nations are watching. They want to see if Trump's approach is effective or reckless. If the strikes work and weaken ISIS, America looks strong. But if reports of civilian deaths gain traction, there will be more chaos. America risks becoming the villain. And let's not forget, Trump already had strained relations with many world leaders. Another military mistake might lose him more friends than enemies and push the US to find even fewer coalitions for combating the common threats. Quite simply, it's not about Somalia at all. It is about the position of America in the world. The million-dollar question, was Trump right? Did bombarding Somalia actually make America any safer? Ask his supporters and the answer will be a big yes. They'll tell you, we took out dangerous terrorists. We sent a message. We kept America safe. But ask his critics the exact opposite statements. They will say, we may have killed some militants, but at what cost? We risked more instability. We may have created even more enemies. And that's the hard truth. Only time will tell. The next few weeks will tell all. Will the Somali ISIS break or hit back even harder? Do these strikes encourage more violence? Will the situation escalate to another level? And for now, we watch and hold on for the impact. Do you believe Trump was correct? Or is this one step too far for America's security, potentially getting out of control? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. If you want to know more about what happened, Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to know what's happening in the world.